Today I'm taking you along with me as I make some gratitude journals. Hey, it's Beth. Welcome. Today I am going to work through some of this pumpkin spice pad from Recollections. It's an older pad. This is actually the second one I have worked on. I did one of the same pad a few years ago, I think. So for the second pad, I have like a dozen or so full sheets left and a bunch of scraps that are kind of over here in a bin. And I thought I would make another gratitude journal or two. I think I did one with it, did some with it a few years ago. I do remember having like a cover that was this. So I think the first time I used this pad, I must have made some too. But it's kind of nice, like a gratitude journal, like we're coming up on November, which some people use as, 30 days of gratitude kind of thing. So I thought I would use up as much of this paper as I can in that. Now, I don't know that I will use like some of these overtly fall patterns. I will probably try to stick to some of the more like neutral patterns, like a plaid and floral, things like that. So I'm sure I'm going to have to bring in some other papers and items to supplement what I have left in here, but I wanted to try and use up a good chunk of this if I can. So that's my plan for today. So let's get crafting. So this is a process video, not a tutorial. I will kind of explain what I'm doing, but I'm not going to walk you through every single step. I still don't classify myself as like an expert journal maker by any means. I love doing them. They're fun and they're a great way to use up paper, but I do know I still have a long way to go to improve on things. So that's why this is just a process video. The first thing I did though was go through the papers I had left and decide which ones I wanted to use for the journals. I was trying to focus on the least fall themed papers. And my thought on this is that while a lot of people use gratitude journals in the month of November, like you have 30 days of thankfulness, I like to create mine to be used really any time of the year. So if someone doesn't necessarily want to use it just in November, they can use it all year and it's not screaming fall. So I did try and avoid the papers with the pumpkins and the leaves and such. Went with more of kind of like the neutral type patterns, the plaids, the polka dots. And I did do acorns, but acorns, I mean, they're small and they're blue, so it didn't scream fall to me. So the next thing, and I am making two journals, so the next thing I'm doing is just going through and cutting down the papers. I cut them down a couple different ways. Sometimes I leave them as 12 by 12. Sometimes I cut them down to like 8.5. I think that's about what my height is for most of them. I'll cut them down to like 8.5 by 12 or 8 by 11. It all just depends, just to kind of give myself a variety. And then once I have them cut down, I do kind of go through and fold the ones I've cut down, just to kind of get a feel for the type of pages I have. So these two papers right here are going to be pockets. So I am going to go ahead and kind of trim up those, like angle the pockets just so that that's done. And then I'm kind of, in this particular step, I'm working on both journals at the same time. So when I'm getting the papers prepped, I'm working on both of the journals at the same time. Later on, when I go through and embellish, I do kind of go through one journal at a time, so you'll see that process as well. I did, for some reason, struggle getting this pocket straight, so it's like trimming bangs. I just had to keep trimming, trying to get it as straight as I could. Sometimes when I'm folding these, you'll see like this one, I think I'm gonna have a like tip out on it. Sometimes I fold the ends in so that later on when I'm going through, I can glue the ends down, and so then it's just kind of a patterned border strip on, you know, the white. Sometimes I fold the white out, sometimes I fold the white in. So I don't know, I don't have a set process. It just kind of depends on the paper and how I feel. So I will end up pulling in some additional papers from my stash, like I mentioned earlier, because when I took out all of the fall patterns, I didn't have a ton left to use. So I will be bringing in some additional papers from my stash, both pattern papers and then some more like journal type papers. Like I have a variety of, there's my pattern papers, I have some ledger papers, some vellum, some lined paper, some copy paper, not copy paper, but drawing paper, kind of like vintage drawing paper, things like that. So I'm going to be going through the same process here on these other pattern papers. You can see I pointed out the Paper Studio logo that's on the back side of some of these. So I do need to make sure that I'm covering those, that they aren't like tip outs or anything. But otherwise, the rest of this process is going to be the same. So I think I will set the rest of my folding to some music for you, and then I will check back in once I moved to the next step.
There were days where we thought we wouldn't make it out, but we stuck it out. Today's our day. Today's our day. There were nights we would fight, no end in sight, nothing was right. Tonight's our night. Tonight's our night. I'll fight for you until this life is over. There's no giving up here, babe. We'll make it out and fall in love tonight. Ain't nothing needed but us feeling right. Just take a chance, we got a wild ride. Wait and see, you and me, we were meant to be. We were meant to be. We were meant to be. There were times when we found it, fell back in love. The best still to come. Our time is now. Our time is now. I'll fight for you until this life is over. There's no giving up here, babe. We'll make it out and fall in love tonight. Ain't nothing needed but us feeling right. Just take a chance, we got a wild ride. Wait and see, you and me, we were meant to be. We were meant to be. We were meant to be. We were meant to be.
also went through my journal stash and I picked out some like ephemera and tags and envelopes and just bits and pieces that I thought would work well in these journals, and am dividing those out between the two journals. So they're not exactly the same for both journals, but they are similar. So, and this is, interesting. This is old, unused journal, or not journal, but planner pages that I added in there as well. So now that I have those sorted out, I am going to work through scraps. These are the scraps that I cut down from my journal pages, and so I'm going to see what I can make with these. Some will just be belly bands, vertical on the pages because they're like the perfect size. Some are going to be cut into pockets. Some will be little flip ups or tip outs, things like that. So I'm just going to work through these, and again, I'm working on both journals at the same time. And once I get through these scraps, I do pull in the scraps from like the rest of the pad just to see if there's anything else like kind of not super fallish that I can include as well, because I can use things as tags or embellishments on the pages. So that is my thought process on this particular part of the process. Here I'm cutting some angles to make some like angled pockets just to kind of mix things up a little bit. So I will be back here with you in a bit. So now I'm going to kind of go through and add all of these extra bits into my journals and work on trying to figure out like where I want to add in the envelopes, the pockets, and things like that. So from this point, I kind of work through my journal 3 different times. So I am doing the big things here, with the envelopes, the pockets, the tip outs and things like that. I will work through these and add them into the journal. And then I'm going to go through the journal again for adding in the like tags and journal cards and things like that and embellishments that I can. And then I'll go through one final time just to see if any of the pages still need things. So is this sufficient? I don't know. This is just how my brain works. I kind of start with the biggest things, add those in, and then keep going until I feel that the journals are done. And at this point, I'm now working pretty much one journal at a time. So I'm doing one with you on camera. I'll do the second one off camera so you don't have to watch the exact same process twice. But I just did kind of wanted to explain why you're going to see me. Like, you may think I'm done and like, oh, nope, she's going back through again. And that's why. I kind of like the way I work through my paper pads. I start with the biggest things first and then keep working my way through until I get everything in that I feel that's in, down to the little bitty scraps that I add. So I don't add something to every single page. Sometimes it's just, I just add a stamp. Sometimes it may just be a little bit of scrap paper or an embellishment of some sorts, but sometimes I do leave them blank. It just depends on the paper and how I feel about it. If it's good for journaling, or usually it's the thinner papers that I tend not to add anything to. But I do, especially to all the pattern papers, try to add places for some journaling since this is a journal. I do want to make sure there are plenty of spots to journal, whether you're journaling directly on the paper or on some journal cards that are in tuck spots or whatnot. So I do bring in a couple stamp sets from my stash and stamp on a few things. And as far as additional embellishments, I really use, like here I've got a little thing of die cuts that I've made with scraps from this pad. So I think that's the majority of the embellishments that I use. I didn't bring in any extra stickers or anything. So this is kind of the fun part, seeing it all come together and making it pretty. So I will let you guys enjoy and check back again at the end. I do laminate my covers, and as I showed you, I just use like the standard 8.5 by 11 laminating pouches from Scotch. I'm using a Scotch laminator. It's been heating up for a while, and I did add an embellishment to the front of what will be the front of my journal cover. I haven't done any scoring. I'm going to run it through the laminator a couple different times just to make sure it's like heated through really well and, you know, is adhering really well. And then once I get that done, I will do the scoring. So I like to laminate my covers just for durability. It does limit me, like I can't go any bigger than 8.5 inches tall or 11 inches wide on the cover because of that, but I do like the durability that it gives. So here I am measuring, like I find the halfway point on the actual paper, and then I go like a 1/4 inch on either side of that. So this particular journal will have about a 1/2 inch spine. That depends on the journal that I'm making. If I'm making a smaller journal, like you'll see at the very end, maybe I'll only do a 1/4 inch spine. And then as far as the stitching, I have this little journal kit that I got off of Amazon. It came with some wax thread and an owl, little scissors, thimble, needles, things like that. I have a little template that I made for myself, and it is very well used, that little green strip there that I put in. So this is kind of like for my standard journal sizes. I use that to help me line up the holes. I'll do that on the page packet, and then we'll also go into the journal cover as well. I don't punch them together because it gets to be a lot. So I'll just punch them separate and then put them together whenever I'm sewing up the thread. So I just pull out a length of thread, and again, this is not a tutorial. This is my least favorite part and probably the part I am the worst at. So, but I do pull out some wax thread, thread it through my needle, start in the middle going from inside out, and then I come at the top from the outside in, go all the way down to the bottom, and then push from inside out, and then come back up to the middle, coming from the outside in. And I will come through at the end and make sure everything is nice and tight before I tie it off. So you'll kind of see me making sure that it's tight on the outside. I will tie that off, trim it down, and then we'll cover that. You can leave it open, like my friend Sarah at Crafting and Relaxing likes to leave her thread showing. I like to hide mine just because, again, I'm not super comfortable with this part, so I just like to hide mine. But then I take this little journal card that I have here and glue it up on the sides so that it will create a pocket, and then I just use my clothespins there to hold that shut. And then I'm going to punch a hole so that people realize it's a pocket. And then the last step for my my binding process, I guess, is just adding a band that will come across to hold the journal shut. I like to use elastic seam binding, and this is a pack I got off Amazon, and I just cut the length that I think I need and then tie it up, and it's stretchy so it can expand with the journal. Okay, here are my finished journals. This is the peach that I used with you, and then on the second one I decided to try out this like more peachy or like a goldish yellow peach color. I don't know. Let me know which one you think goes best. I chose this one because of this orange, like the peachy orange up here in the letters, but I don't know. I think this ties better into the gold detail in the cover. So let me know your opinion in the description box below. I can easily change it out if you guys think one is better than the other. So for my little title here, I don't think I did that on camera with you guys because I just kind of got carried away and knew I needed to do that before I laminated. So these were 6x6 cut aparts that had this saying in it, and I just fussy cut around the words to eliminate any of the leaves. Why do I keep saying leaves? Leaves in the title, because again, I didn't want this to be overly fallish. I wanted it, you know, people could use it as a gratitude journal any time of year. So that's what I did. I did the both thing. I did it the same way on both journals. And then again, a quick flip through, because you saw me make this one. I did go back through and tuck in journal cards in places, or tags in places where there would be text spots. So it's a fun little journal. I used some things in my stash that have been around for a while, like those envelopes, some tags. I made use of scraps along the way for die cuts, just to add some interest, some embellishments. And this was like some old paper from my stash, same way with this one. Like, this is a really old envelope. I got the flip up idea from Sarah, who's crafting and relaxing here on YouTube. I just saw her do that in a recent video. This, I do need to come back and add a journal card in here, this pocket in the middle that covers my tie-offs for the binding. This was an old Creative Memories journal card, I think. And I like the fact that it wasn't just rectangle, so I tucked that one in there. And then also, I forgot I had pulled out some vellum sayings for these, and I just tucked it in here for now. But it says, cheerfulness keeps up a kind of daylight in the mind and fills it with a steady and perpetual serenity, from Joseph Addison. And some of my journal cards are just blank unlined index cards. Here I just created a tag to go in to fit my little glassine bag there. So that's the first one. That's the one you saw me make. One thing about this more peachy seam binding is it matches the peach sheer ribbon that I used for that one tag. And then I did the second one off camera. It's pretty much similar format, just different. Sometimes it's different papers, different journal cards, and maybe things in different orders. Like here, this was the piece of the denim pattern that actually had the Paper Studio like information on the back side, so I couldn't have it with the denim side out. So I put it here with the white side out, and then took an lined index card, just cut it in half and added it here for journal spots. And then this just felt weird and blank to me, so I took a little craft bag that comes with these little tags on the inside, covered it with some paper. So a few different things in here. Sometimes the embellishments were different depending on what I had. Another envelope. Another old envelope. So if I can, like to make more than one, just like with cards. If I can make more than one at a time, I will, just because it's more efficient and sometimes takes the guesswork out of it for me rather than having to figure out, two totally different journals. Here is another one of those Creative Memory Circle journal spots, and then this saying says, no act of kindness, however small, is ever wasted. Aesop. So the journals still end up being different from each other, just from the fact that I don't always have like exact duplicates. That pocket, I'm going to have to trim that one down. That pocket's a little weird. Figure that out. So, everybody's got their own way of doing things. But for me, I work better in multiples. It's just how my brain works, I think. So that was the second journal. And then with some of the scraps I made a tiny little gratitude journal. So this one I took some scrap vinyl and cut out with my Silhouette machine, which is like a Cricut. Just cut out the words, "So very blessed." And I laminated this one too. This was just a scrap of paper left in the pad. That was the only one big enough to be my cover. And I also had a scrap of this silver seam binding left that was like perfect size for this one. So this one actually has less pattern paper and more non-pattern paper, if that makes sense. So this was just a scrap of what I used. This was from the cover that I used on the bigger ones. And then I have several pages of like lined paper. So this is just kind of more of a writing journal than anything else. Did add a doily. This was a scrap, and then I fussy cut out the journaling part of a 3x4 cut apart card and put it on there, so it kind of just looks like it ties in with the gold line on that scrap. Fussy cut out one of the flowers from this pattern here just to tie those in. Then I've got some like blank copy paper, the scrap of that ledger paper. This one I did bring in leaves, but I did figured one pattern wouldn't be so bad, and I was really short on scraps of non-fall pattern paper. So this is the center part covering up my ties, and I just left it closed. It's just a little turny flappy page. So this one I covered up most of the leaves with a little envelope, journal card, and a scrap of vintage paper. So this one is just much more simple and more focused on the journaling than the papers, whereas, you know, the other ones are a little more fun, a little more interactive. But my thought was, like, a lot of my journals this size are $20 plus when I saw them at my craft shows. So I thought I would try to introduce some smaller versions just to see, like, they would be at a lower price point and, you know, simpler to make, but and then also smaller in size, but just to have like a varied price point. So if someone can't afford 20, like maybe they can afford 8, 9, 10, whatever I decide to price these at, and still have an opportunity to journal. So I don't know if I mentioned it in my voiceover or not, but, you know, seam binding, like the stretchy, is great for hair ties as well. So I had just a little bit of this left, and I thought, oh, I'm going to make a hair tie. So I just tied a square knot really tight and like pulled it as tight as I could. And then now I can actually use it. It's a small hair tie. It'll go around my hair maybe twice, which is fine. For a loose, low ponytail. So I also made a hair tie with that scrap. So anyway, I may come back and add some things to these after I kind of work through the rest of that pad. I might take some of the scraps and make some additional tags or embellishments, or just like to have some extras to tuck in there so people can decorate, you know, as they go through the journal as well. But I will do that after I'm kind of done with the rest of the pad. I'll see what kind of scraps I have left. So, but these are the journals I made. Again, let me know if you have a preference between the peachy or the more yellowy gold on these journals. Then I can just switch it out if you do have a preference. So let me know that in the description box below. I've also included the playlist for other projects that I've made with this pad. So hope you guys enjoyed. This was a long one, so if you made it all the way through, thank you so very much for your time, and I hope you all have a very crafty day.